So, joined today by neighbor and San Mateo resident, Mike Swire. Glad you could join, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Max. This is awesome.
Well, we've met through bicycle advocacy, and you've got, many years living in this community. And first of all, tell me about your neighborhood. I know you recently moved, but tell us a little bit about the neighborhood.
Sure. Yeah, so I live in Meadows now, which is a very cool neighborhood. Meadows is where they used to have the horse race track, and then I think 10, 15 years ago, they ripped it out and put in a really cool kind of mixed use, missing middle, very walkable, very bikeable community. And it's really nice because there's lots of apartments and lots of people walking around and schools, but you can also walk and bike just about everywhere, which is really nice. So even though I do have a car, I try to use it as little as possible. I can walk to 3 or 4 grocery stores, lots of bars, restaurants, beer places. So it's very cool. I love it.
I know you say it's a new community, relatively speaking, as far as the construction and development that's happened there.
Mm-hmm.
Is it at all in transition in any ways? Are there changes coming to that neighborhood, or proposals around changes? And
I think there's definitely a lot of changes planned at Hillsdale. So I'm about a 5-minute walk from the Hillsdale Mall, which is really nice. And as you might know, there's a huge debate over what to do with that area. With, was it Measure T? We just approved a lot more height possibilities in our areas around transit, which makes a lot of sense because we have the Hillsdale train station, which is a great train station, and it's right across the street. So I think the debate there is, what do we do with that area? I think the proposal is to keep the newer part of the mall, but ultimately put in a lot more housing and some new shopping and maybe some new retail there. So that's one thing. There's a bunch of new apartments coming in different areas. There's a big debate about parking. They had a parking enforcement moratorium for a long time during COVID, where even though it's a transit-oriented development, they said we're not going to enforce parking rules 2 hours during the weekdays.
They being the city?
Yeah, the city. And they just lifted that moratorium, so now you cannot park your car on the street all day, as was the original intent. And there's a lot of people upset because they've gotten very used to being able to park their cars on the street all the time. And it definitely affects people's lives. So my apartment building, for instance, used to offer free parking in the garage downstairs, and now they're charging upwards of $150 per spot per month, which is a lot of money. So that definitely affects some people, but we are right across from the train track. So I think a lot of people moved there so that they could take advantage of easy commutes and electrified Caltrain and such. So there's a bit of transition, but yeah, we'll see.
Let me just adjust this a little bit more, because there we go. Cool. So what's your feelings about the transitions? And I guess there's a proposal for changing Hillsdale Mall, and there are a lot of dimensions on which you can consider it, like residential versus office versus retail,
right.
How much parking there is and how much green space there is, and maybe the street configuration. I don't know. Are they going to change the street configuration as part of this proposal?
Honestly, I'm not super up on all the details of the project, so I might be wrong, but my high-level thoughts are, it sounds like a good thing. I think if you look at malls and retail across the country, that's a somewhat dying method of shopping for a lot of people. I know my teenage daughter might argue otherwise, but it's, people are buying stuff online and such, and we don't potentially need as much retail, all in one area. And they're going to put in more housing, which is certainly a huge concern given the price of housing and the number of people we have commuting from 2 hours away because they can't afford to live here on the peninsula where most of the jobs are. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, it's really positive. And I think that's a good area to do it because, again, we have public transit right across the street. The Hillsdale stop is one of the best stops on the peninsula. So if you live anywhere between San Francisco and San Jose, Diridon, especially with the electrified Caltrain, you can get there within 30 minutes at not too much cost. Maybe you don't need a car. Maybe you only need one car. So ultimately, we need more people living on the peninsula as opposed to in the far East Bay. And this is the way to do it in a smart manner so that, we don't have to fill our streets with parking. We don't have to build wider highways to enable people to commute from afar. I think from a municipal spending perspective, this is the way we want to go. We need more density, and it's smart to do it near transit.
So this is a very contemporaneous subject around the highways, and I know that is a topic you are really passionate about and active in advocacy around. So for people maybe not in our neighborhood, can you share a little bit about how San Mateo is laid out and what some of the proposals are to increase the highway footprint in the community?
Right. Yeah, so it's a very timely subject. There's a huge meeting at the City Council this week. And, the basic issue is, as I alluded to earlier, that we have a lot of jobs here, not a lot of housing, and thus people somehow have to get to their jobs. The question that our elected leaders have and the staff is, do we want them to drive, which has traditionally been the default, and the way that we've allocated most of our public transportation spending, unfortunately, which is expensive. It requires a lot of maintenance. It pollutes and makes people sick. It contributes to traffic violence, especially in the neighborhoods across, next to the highway, like San Mateo High School, where my kids go to school. Or would we rather take, Caltrain that we've been talking about, which is clean and electric now and regular, and you get to meet people on it instead of sitting there getting angry in traffic. It just makes more sense from a community and cost effectiveness standpoint. But that kind of change in attitude is taking a long time. So right now there's a proposal at 101 and 92, which are the two primary highways that join on the east side of San Mateo. And the question is whether or not we build a whole nother flyover, which is basically a whole massive concrete structure in the sky to facilitate more driving from the East Bay to San Mateo and other points on the peninsula. And it's a $200 million project at least. Those figures are old. It's probably maybe closer to $300 million. And ultimately, it just doesn't make sense from a public transportation or from a public spending standpoint because, we've tried to widen the highways. We've widened the highways on 101 between Redwood City and San Bruno. And within a year or so, we've had an increase in traffic volume such that the delays are just as bad as they were before, but now we have maybe 20%, we don't know, more cars on the road. So highway widening, unfortunately, never works in terms of reducing delays. It just encourages more people to drive. It encourages more people to drive from farther away, more people to live in Stockton instead of around here where we're building all of the housing. So the question is, do we spend our transportation dollars on a project like this that would basically add a lane, or would we rather spend it on Caltrain and BART? And unfortunately, the way that our transportation system is set up here, our transit agencies in the Bay Area get less municipal and regional support than transit agencies almost anywhere in the country. So 70% of BART and Caltrain revenue actually comes from the fare box, i.e. you and I when we ride. If you look at New York City and other areas, it's like closer to 20 or 30%. So they're receiving like a 70% subsidy from the federal government, state government, etc. And that just puts those transit agencies in a very precarious position. They can't plan for the long term. They can't guarantee levels of service. The service fluctuates year to year. And it's all because we're spending so much money on roads, and it just doesn't make sense in terms of the community and the taxpayer dollars for the future.
So I won't, I want to caveat that I'm not a guru or expert in this subject matter, and I don't, expect you to be. The whole source of this $200 million, which is not enough, like you say, to complete the project,
right,
is a ballot measure that voters in the entire region voted on beyond our immediate neighborhood, called the Regional Measure 3. This is the third such regional measure. And my understanding is it raised the bridge toll amount. And this is the toll amount that people pay to drive over the bridge from the East Bay to the peninsula, where we're residing and where we're biking around right now. And so some of the, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I think some of my understanding is some of the money raised through bridge toll hikes was earmarked for San Mateo County. And there was language in the ballot measure that people voted on that says it needs to be money spent towards addressing congestion at the number one congestion point in our area, in this county, which is this highway interchange, which we're actually biking towards. I don't know if you knew that's what I was steering us towards.
Very good directional.
Yeah, so we're biking towards this highway interchange right now. It's going to get a lot louder.
Scene of the crime. Yep.
Because that's cars for you.
Yep.
And it's, I think, tough to address the congestion at this particular interchange through funding BART or Caltrain, because neither BART nor Caltrain, the two regional trains, are well servicing this bridge traffic.
Correct.
Like funding Caltrain better won't service the people riding the 101-92 interchange.
Yes, totally agree that we've developed a world where it's very hard to get around to where people live, where people work without a car. The fundamental question is, like treating a drug addict, do you keep, giving them the substance to which they're addicted, or do you slowly try to wean the community off of it and move in a different direction? And that's not always the easiest answer, because people need to get where they get to work, and people can't all afford to live here on the peninsula, and these changes don't happen overnight, and you can't just pick up your home and move. But at some point we have to stop making decisions that keep perpetuating the addiction to long distance commutes and car dependency, which is super expensive for a lot of people. Go ahead.
I guess the point I'm getting at is $200 million.
Yep.
That's a lot of moolah.
Totally. Yeah.
Let's roll a little bit forward. What would you do with $200 million to address the congestion problem we're biking towards right now? It's a weekend, so there's not that much congestion, but...
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example. So there's a project proposed here. We're on 19th Avenue, and Fashion Boulevard is up ahead, and they've been discussing for 10, 15 years of trying to provide connectivity between, we're on the west side of 101, to the east side, where there's jobs, there's shopping, there's the Bay Trail, etc. And traditionally, the 101 has been a very difficult thing to cross. We've had a lot of deaths in San Carlos, on Hillsdale, etc. So I think one thing that has traditionally been very underfunded, promised, and yet not delivered is safe crossings of 101. especially for people on foot and bike. So those projects have been killed. There was a project in San Carlos that was killed when we widened the 101 widening, and unfortunately a young woman was killed there 2 or 3 months ago because that project never happened and is now back to scratch and too expensive, as opposed to if we had done it in the first place. So I think crossing 101 is a good use of money, save lives, help people get around without cars. And then I think even if it's not benefiting this exact area, the more we spend to subsidize or to shore up the finances of Caltrain and BART, etc., we'll eventually be able to have service like a bus that goes to the East Bay. So that proposal I was just talking about, they tout that as a HOV-friendly project, and yet there's no public transit that comes across the East Bay. So if our...
Now this is a highway interchange.
Yep, this is not fun here. So this is an example of where we could improve things. There's a school right here on our right, and kids could actually bike here if it was safe instead of driving and creating congestion. But instead, we're too focused on the highway projects.
So a lot of what you're just describing, like safer crossings over this highway, mega highway. Speed limit is 35 miles per hour right here, by the way, and we're going uphill in a painted bike lane.
Yep.
Not the safest. In fact, in just a minute, we're going to bike by the site of a pedestrian death of the last 3 months. There's a gentleman, Mike Kramer, is that his name?
Yeah, Mark, I think Kramer. I didn't know him. No. Yeah.
Walking here, hit by a driver, killed, and hit and run. So the driver who killed Mark never found. And I guess setting aside the really morbid reality, which is somebody died here a few months ago, one of our neighbors. A lot of what you're describing, Mike, is relating to, let's maybe go single file here.
All right.
Let's turn left here. Yeah. So I want to play devil's advocate a little bit, because I am totally with you about spending more money, making this kind of area safer for walkers or bikers to be able to cross what are really impenetrable barriers of highway infrastructure for walkers or bicyclists. This is really unsafe, not gonna lie.
It's a concrete jungle, as you can see.
Yeah, like
it's not pretty.
I just want to do a 360 around where we're standing on our bikes, and maybe I'll camera our way through this intersection. But oh shit. Let's maybe take a break right over here.
Is this where the crash happened? I'm not...
No, we biked by where the crash happened, yeah.
They put up a memorial, didn't they, in some spot?
The memorial must have been taken down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where was it? It's further that way?
No, it was right there. It was right there. We biked by it. That's my understanding.
Okay. I don't know.
But I was saying I'd love to play devil's advocate here, because I am totally with you on spending money, taxpayer money, righting some of these mobility wrongs that the highways create in our community, making it easier to bike and walk across Caltrans's highways. And on the other hand, the voters voted for this, East Bay voters included, voted for raising the bridge tolls that they pay. Largely the traffic is commuters coming from East Bay to this community and then driving back, and the money is earmarked for addressing their congestion needs, like they voted for it. A lot of the projects you're listing, Caltrain, BART, improved mobility across Highway 101 and 92 in our neighborhood, doesn't really benefit folks living in the East Bay who voted for raising their own bridge tolls. So how can that money, the devil's advocate here is, let's say the County of San Mateo elects to spend $200 million on improving walking and biking across highways in the peninsula without benefiting these voters in the East Bay. Could the county be sued for not spending the money on addressing congestion issues? Or I guess, just how flexible is this $200 million? That's a lot of money. But I could see, a group of people in the East Bay who do drive to the peninsula because they're not well served by public transit today. Saying, hey, we voted for raising our own bridge tolls, and then you took the money and spent it on enriching, the walkability and bikeability of your community without benefiting our community. So how can the $200 million, I guess, be spent equitably because of these voters imposing a tax on themselves and then us having control over how the money gets spent?
No, that's a great question, and it's, you're really touching on the crux of the problems in our area. It all comes back to where the money is coming from, and the basic, to take it up a level and demonstrate how we got here. If you go to New York, they have, I think it's called MTA, is the Transportation Authority, and if you go through all 5 boroughs with like 15 million people, there is one transit agency that taxes and raises revenue, etc., and makes decisions for all 15 million people. If you come to the Bay Area, you have, I believe it's 25 different transit agencies. Even in this county, we have Samtrans, we have BART, we have Caltrain. If you go across the bridge, you have AC Transit, etc., etc., etc. And on top of that, you have different funding measures. So in San Mateo County, we have Measure A and W, which I believe are a half-cent tax each. Half-cent tax.
I want to make sure the mic is close to your mouth.
Okay, thanks. Half-cent tax each. And that's money raised by San Mateo County taxpayers for projects in San Mateo County. So part of the money that would go towards this $200 million, it would come from multiple sources. Maybe the federal government, maybe the state government, part of it potentially RM3. I'm not sure. They haven't worked all of this out, so this is hypothetical, but you're right. It could come from RM3, which is a regional measure and includes East Bay people. But a lot of it would also come from San Mateo taxpayers directly. So I sit on the San Mateo County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, where we had helped the board understand the way the public thinks about how to spend the tax dollars, and I'm speaking only as an individual, not on behalf of the group. But one of the challenges that we face is what's the best use of money for San Mateo taxpayers. So even though I hesitate to say promises were made, because usually when these measures come out, they're very vague in terms of what they're going to do. So even if they say we want to address congestion in 101-92, and nobody's disputing the congestion is bad here. It's if you look at vehicle speeds, they definitely decrease. But there's a couple things there. One, what does it mean to address congestion? Study after study has shown that when you widen highways, more people drive from far away, fewer people work from home, fewer people bike, that ultimately that excess capacity is taken up by more vehicle miles traveled. Mm-hmm. And in the long run, you cannot solve capacity, or you cannot solve congestion through increasing capacity. So I would argue, even if that was, well, I don't want to address the promised issue legally. That's a complicated issue, and I'm not a lawyer, thank God. But it just doesn't work. And we just bike through an area where people are scared to bike. And part of reducing congestion is giving people an opportunity, maybe not from the East Bay, it's hard to bike from there, but here's a trip where people are potentially getting on the highway or getting on these very busy roads because they're scared to let their kids walk or bike to the community school, which is literally a mile away. So it's complicated, and again, we have to get back to what kind of world do we want to live in, and how do we want to design the future, as opposed to obsessing about the mess we've created and how do we put Band-Aids on it.
So I'm hearing a couple of things here, and correct me, one is that yes, there's some money from the bridge toll hike that's part of the funding package, which would go towards expanding this highway overpass we're staring at actually right now. Let me get this, because this is literally what they're talking about right here. You can see the Half Moon Bay, San Jose, San Francisco signs. They're discussing adding another lane, and that would require a lot of concrete.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the extra lane that they're going to add is only an express lane. So we haven't really touched on that part of the project, but we recently completed an express lane installation on 101 between Redwood City and San Bruno. We talked about they widened the highway to enable that, which they didn't have to do and is environmentally catastrophic. But the proposal here is simply to install express lanes connecting the two. So right now the challenge is if you come across the bridge and you want to go 101 north, to get to the express lane you'd have to cut over a couple lanes of traffic, which certainly complicates things, it's less safe, etc. So they want to build a flyover to ease that transition. But from an equity perspective, who's really going to benefit from that? Most of the people that use the express lanes on 101 right now are individuals who pay for the right to use that lane. And the fares there can be upwards of $19. Average is probably $2 or $3, but then you have to pay for each segment, etc. You also have corporate shuttles, which are great. I'd rather those people take corporate shuttles than drive, but those are actually usually pretty wealthy people that are working for tech companies. There is no public transit allowing you to get across the bridge for $3 or $4. So it's a huge equity issue, and the benefits of this express lane largely go to wealthier people, just to be clear.
Yeah, no, acknowledged. So there's a couple things here that you said. One is RM3 bridge toll fund revenues don't fully fund this, and so some of it's coming out of this physical community's taxes.
Yep.
Okay, it's all to be decided, not set in stone. But the RM3 funding is not enough alone to fund this highway expansion, and so when going to other funding sources who have their own fingers in the pie and fingers on the scale, rather, about where the money gets routed, it's not as if East Bay voters who raised bridge tolls and Peninsula voters who also voted to raise bridge tolls said you must build this lane expansion.
Correct.
And then secondly, I guess for me, I'm wondering, how can the RM3 money be flexed to address congestion, and also to your point about how inequitable expanding that highway is? I mean, you have to own a car and be able to afford the bridge toll just to be able to use that hypothetical toll lane, express lane, unless you're a salaried W-2 employee at a high-paying tech company riding a private shuttle. Members of the public are not allowed to ride those private shuttles, which would use these express lanes. What are equitable congestion addressing ways to spend the $200 million in ways that benefit the East Bay residents who are paying the toll into RM3? Because I love this community, and I love the future of having better mobility, safer mobility, where neighbors like Mark Kramer doesn't die in a hit and run accident walking, not just biking, walking. But I get the equity piece of these are East Bay residents who don't really see the benefits from bike bridges over 101. Maybe it relieves some local driving traffic that would be on this flyway, but can the $200 million, I guess RM3 funds aren't the whole $200 million, but
Correct.
Can the RM3 funds be used to fund bringing back a public bus across the bridge? What prevents RM3 funds from being spent on operations rather than a capital project, like a physical infrastructure?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on RM3. That usually goes through CCAG, at least in San Mateo.
That's the Council of City
and Council of Governments of San Mateo County. It's basically
CCAG is the whole region, though, the whole San Francisco Bay Area.
No, CCAG. I think maybe there's multiple, but CCAG of San Mateo County basically has 25 or so electeds, one from each city and maybe also the county and also the transit districts, that determine how San Mateo County will use different sources of funds. So it's basically a funnel for money. I think it can be federal money, it can be state money, or it could be regional money like RM3. To be clear, those decisions are made, as well as the decisions by SMCTA, the San Mateo County Transportation Authority, which is also electeds. Those are San Mateo's decisions as to what to do with the money that's been given to San Mateo.
Okay.
There's money that goes to Alameda County that will benefit largely the people in Alameda County. And maybe that includes the bridge coming over, or the bus that comes over the bridge. So just to be clear, that was an AC Transit bus that was canceled during COVID and has not been reinitiated.
This is one that connected Hayward and the Hayward Mall or Chabot?
The BART, I think.
Okay, from Hayward BART Station, crosses the bridge, which, by the way, this bridge is the longest bridge in the entire Bay Area. I think it's 8 miles long. It connected from Hayward BART Station to the Hillsdale Mall. The problem with that bus, as far as being an effective tool for relieving congestion on this flyway, is that folks who are taking this are driving north towards San Francisco, towards the communities of Burlingame, Millbrae, South San Francisco, San Bruno, maybe even San Francisco. And so a bus that goes from Hayward BART to Hillsdale Mall is serving Hillsdale Mall. Once you're at Hillsdale Mall, you gotta walk maybe 10 minutes to Caltrain station, and then you're serviced by Caltrain north-south. But the Caltrain stations between Hillsdale and San Francisco really haven't built up around the stations, and so wherever these drivers are headed on this bridge heading northbound, they do save a lot of money, or a lot of time taking their cars rather than a bus to Caltrain. Because once they get to the Caltrain station at San Bruno, there's not a lot. There's not a tremendous amount around that Caltrain station. And so even if people are stuck in congestion at 15 miles per hour on this interchange, they'll elect to do it over an hourly bus from Hayward Station to Hillsdale Mall because the time difference is meaningful enough. So I just want to lay out all of the issues, not difficulties, I'd say, the big difficulties with addressing congestion right here. And I guess,
It's definitely a public transit bus would not be a panacea for all the problems we're talking about. I mean, the bus would run probably twice an hour. It would carry 100 people. I mean, that's not going to put a dent in, I believe it's 50,000 cars come across this bridge every day, mostly from east to west because the jobs are here and most of the housing is over there. And there's no question that I'll bet you the bus would stop at the Hillsdale Caltrain, so it would be, I think, pretty quick once you get over there.
That would be pretty good,
But then you're totally correct. Let's say you're going to South City and you work in biotech, you're going to have to get a shuttle. And they do, RM3, I believe, goes towards also funding shuttle programs through Samtrans and such. And they work in conjunction with Genentech and the other big employers to make sure that those...
You'd be getting to Hayward BART. You'd be riding the bus to Hillsdale Caltrain. Let's say there's a direct connection. You're getting on Caltrain. Then you'd be getting on another agency's shuttle to to take you to
It's a
your
nightmare.
office.
Yes, and you're hoping that the fares are coordinated. You're hoping that the schedules are coordinated.
And God help you if you're trying to bring a bike onto
or
all
you
of
have
those.
kids at home, or you're at a meeting and all of a sudden there's a crash on the bridge here. We're definitely challenged in the Bay Area by the geography. Having this big body of water doesn't make things easier. But there's things we can control, like the 23 transit agencies, like coordinating schedules. Like, we've done a better job of coordinating fares so that if you use your Clipper card, you don't have to pay every time you go to a different transit agency. I think there's still some of that, but it's getting better, and Seamless Bay Area is doing some great work there. But it's certainly not a panacea. One thing we could do, instead of having, I don't know if the bridge is 2 or 3 lanes in each direction, why don't we have an HOV lane on the bridge, such that, it would be not just 10, 15 minutes faster, but half an hour faster to take that bus. It's really, you need an order of magnitude improvement in the efficiency and convenience and comfort of public transit to get people to leave their cars at home.
Yeah.
This isn't about making it more difficult to drive. It's just, if we have incremental dollars, making it easier to take transit instead of making, again, this is a project that 99% of the benefit goes to the people that drive, and 80% of that is people that drive alone. That's not the best use of money. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's certainly not going to make it worse by continuing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hammer home 2 points I'm thinking about that are really heavy duty to me. Is it's not just the $200-300 million today. This is creating infrastructure that has a short lifetime.
Right.
That lifetime means that when it inevitably falls apart, taxpayers will have to rehabilitate and rebuild this extremely expensive highway infrastructure.
It's deferred liability, definitely.
We're creating liability by creating more highway infrastructure. The other point I'd love to make is the bike lanes we just rode down past the site of Mark Kramer's death are slated to create protected bike lanes, and this project hasn't been transparent about whether expanding this highway would render the costs of creating protected bike lanes underneath it more expensive and therefore less likely to happen, or impossible to happen, or won't happen for another 10-15 years. So doing this project causes other safe streets projects to not happen.
Not to mention the funding issue. Like this bike ped safety project, which would save lives, is $9
so
million
much cheaper.
But it's also $9 million underfunded.
And not funded yet.
Yes, it's much easier to find money for highway projects for some reason than bike ped projects. So the way it works at CCAG or even SMCTA is, let's say City of San Mateo has a project that they want to do. They need to write up a proposal, a grant and such, and submit it to the transportation authorities, and then they compete in this Hunger Games against Millbrae, against South City, to see who's going to get this little pot, or their slice of this little pot of money. And if we get a bike lane here, that means you're not going to get one in Millbrae. So again, we've created this balkanized system of fiefdoms, and bike lanes in one city don't connect to the next city, and funding goes to one area but not the next. And it's just created this mishmash, and the inefficiency and the waste and the lack of scale has gotten us to this point we're at today, with people revving their engines.
Yeah, wants to let us know he's here.
He's like,
F
you.
We know you're here. Totally. So some of this is a governance issue of local versus regional, and regional not it being a zero-sum battle for local governments to win the money.
Right.
I want to mention one more thing real quick before we keep biking on, which is we are standing on private land. This is a surface parking lot. No one's parked here. You can see the area behind us is fenced off. They sometimes have or they previously had like a circus, like some pop-up Christmas trees selling.
Halloween things.
This is honestly blighted land.
Right.
And I know that this has also been the site of application to build moderate-sized housing, like 3 or 4-story apartment buildings. And the neighborhood local to here has been really negative about how the traffic impacts and parking impacts of building on this lot would harm the existing neighborhood. And it's ironic that this infrastructure for a highway is being built to accommodate traffic from the East Bay, and all sorts of spillover traffic uses these side streets, these surface streets that are not the highway, to access the highway. But if housing was built here, people wouldn't be driving from the East Bay.
Exactly.
And I'm sure that will arouse a lot of disagreement for me to say that, but I would rather housing be on this site than blight. And this surface parking lot doesn't generate tax revenue, doesn't generate foot traffic to the strip mall across the street.
Right.
And yeah, it would generate some additional parking demand on the streets and traffic, but the alternative is spending hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money on building infrastructure for people who live in communities where housing is getting built. So,
and the other irony is the project that has been proposed, there's multiple options and they're still early in development, but there's a good chance that the construction of the new flyovers here would require taking of up to 33 residential properties in the adjacent neighborhood, which is low income, really old homes, been there forever, as well as potentially 2 parks in the area, and there's certainly not enough park space here. So we could, I don't know if it would get rid of the entire residence, but theoretically you have 33 less residences right near the jobs. There's a huge office tower right here to facilitate more people driving over from Stockton, Modesto, etc. So again, it's not just this project. If this project gets built, you're going to have more development in Stockton. You're going to have more development in Modesto. And then 20 years from now, those people are going to be like, hey, we need another project. You know, the traffic's back and you know, you're perpetuating the addiction if we keep spending money to head in that direction. You know, we're not saying that we need to acknowledge that a lot of our workers, you know, especially those who aren't well paid, live in the East Bay because that's all they can afford. But we have to start building housing here, and we're not taking away the ability for them to drive across the bridge, but we just got to stop encouraging more people to drive across the bridge.
Yeah, well, let's keep rolling.
Sure.
We've been stationary for a bit. Let's go up Norfolk. We'll get to bike lane in a moment.
Are they putting bike lanes in here?
Nope. But there's a bike lane, maybe a couple hundred.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking.
Yeah.
Only as good as the... And is this retail going to stay, or what's the plan here?
Yeah. That's my understanding, yeah.
And this place is closed down, right? The fish market?
Yeah, this is on our right is the site of a proposed housing development. So I feel like we covered a lot of meaty ground. I'm running low on my camera battery. And I think it would be good to wrap it up. So I know we like I said, touched on some meaty subjects. Let's look at your immediate neighborhood in Bay Meadows. And you mentioned some of the things that are upcoming. Across the train tracks is Hillsdale Mall project, but if you could change one thing about your neighborhood for the positive, like your immediate neighborhood, name one, or name a few if you have them that you've observed from living there.
I'm pretty happy there, honestly. I think it's great because it's very walkable, very bikeable, a lot of young people. You know, there's a school there, the Nueva school has their upper high school, which has kids. It's a really famous school. They have kids coming from all over the Bay Area, and I've seen stats that 70-80% of the kids take Caltrain every day, which is awesome because it's right across the street, and they actually provide free passes to, I think, the students. Not free, they're paying $1 zillion, but they at least encourage it.
It's not a public school. It's
Exactly,
not a public
yes,
school.
it's a private school, but they're doing the right thing. So, but that's a good example. My kids went to San Mateo High, which is a public school in North Central, which is the most dangerous streets in the city, and unfortunately the city council just voted to get rid of the bike lanes right next to the school. Why isn't transit free for all the kids? I mean, it's to park on campus, it's actually it's only $10, I think, for a year or something.
This is for San Mateo High School students?
Greatly underpriced. And I talked to the principal about it, and she was like, well, we don't want to make it too expensive. It would be, anti-equity. And I'm like, well, most people drive cars. Equity is not, the people that really are equity challenged are the kids that have.
Where do those $10 even go?
Yeah, God knows, but they just redid the area or the parking lot, and they put in tons of parking for students, and it just doesn't make sense. Not to mention the fact that teenagers suck as drivers. So just from a public safety standpoint, I think everybody wins when fewer teenagers drive. So I don't know. I'm pretty happy with my neighborhood. I think the biggest things for the area in general are for people to start paying attention to transportation, because unfortunately these decisions are somewhat obscure and technical, and they happen once every 10 years, and then the machinery gets in motion. And I think that people need to pay attention and certainly talk to their elected leaders and make sure that when they get on boards like the SMCTA and like CCAG, that they're doing the right thing. They're not widening highways. They're making sure that Caltrain and BART get funded so people, so that we can have quality, clean, frequent transit. And we also need to hold their feet to the fire in terms of, when they say they're going to build a bike lane, or they build a bike lane, 2 years later they're not ripping it out like the San Mateo City Council is proposing. So, if we don't start holding electeds' feet to the fire, the insanity is just going to keep on happening, and we're going to get congestion and pollution and kids dying in the streets. And
I gotta laugh because it's just so dark for me to handle.
Sorry to go dark.
It's all right, man.
This is the message, because ultimately we can talk about policy, but we don't make the policy. We just try to influence it. So it's up to us to choose good people and make sure they know where we stand and act accordingly.
Agreed. Well, Mike, let's call it there. I'm running low on battery.
Awesome.